What's up, guys? What's going on, man? I'm Paul. This is Pauline Theology's daily devotional, and we're going to the book of John right now, the Gospel according to John. And we have been learning a lot about who Jesus is, what he does, his person, how he narrates the Father, how he displays in every way the goodness of God. And so I hope you've been enjoying it. And if it's your first time here, man, glad you're here. This is Trust in Jesus Ministries, where we're trying to help you trust in Jesus more every day. And if it's your first time to trust in Jesus, man, we just want to give you some information to help you put your faith in him, because he is definitely, infinitely worthy of trust. Anyway, we're in John chapter 5, 10 through 14. So if you haven't read that yet, go ahead, stop the tape, check it out, and see what it has to say. John 5, 10 through 14, because we just kind of talk about what's going on. And so for you to read it beforehand helps you so that you're not kind of lost or anything like that. So check it out, stop the tape, see what it has to say. Now, if you've already read John 5, 10 through 14, we're going to go ahead and talk about it, man, because you ain't got to stop the tape. So what's going on? The first of the four questions, what's happening in the story? Well, it said in 9b, because we talked a little bit about it. I think I forgot to mention it, but now I want to bring it to the forehead. It says that it was the Sabbath. Dun, dun, dun. And so we have like a new turn in where the story is headed, though the stories actually connect because it's about who God is and man's relationship to him. In the previous episode, we talked about how the the lame man sought magic in order to find the power of God. He didn't know the person of God. And now we're going to see that these people are finding the Jews, the leaders, the ruling elite of the Hebrew people, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They're trying to find obedience in the law, so much as to create more of the law to say that they are knowing God. And so that's through the Sabbath. That's the understanding of the Sabbath. And so we're going to see these two relationships that people have with God that are incorrect, because God demands a personal knowing relationship rather than this magic or this rule following. And so let's check it out and see what it has to say. What's going on is this guy, right, got healed. It was the Sabbath. Dun, dun, dun. And when they saw him carrying his bed, carrying his mat, that mat that uh, used to carry him, when they saw him carrying that, they said, it is not permitted on the Sabbath to be able to pick up your bed and carry it somewhere. So this is not a law that was specifically stated in the 417, something like that, laws that's in the Torah, but it was what the elders began to create traditions to help to understand the law. So a little bit about this is that, man, they are trying to do the right thing, right? It's not like it's that they were doing this to glorify themselves or something. They saw in it a way to honor God and said, man, I want to honor him so much that I'm going to do such and such. And so they created all these other traditions. But what happened now is that these traditions have exceeded the knowing of God into something that is just what you have to do. So much so that what they saw in this man being healed, which he was lame for 38 years, man. They looked directly past that, the power and the working of God, and they saw only that he was breaking this tradition. I'm putting that in drop quotes, tradition that was made by them. Okay, so that's the problem that's going on here. And then then John having this theme that we see throughout the whole thing is about knowing him. I've been stressing that already at the beginning. And it says that the guy who was healed said, man, I don't even know who it was, because he didn't know Jesus. So he was looking for that magical power, and he got it, you know what I'm saying, in the sense that he was healed. But he didn't enter into that relationship with Jesus because it says he didn't know. who had healed him. And so they asked them, the people were like, who did it, man? Because they were focused now not on the person who was breaking the tradition, the Sabbath, but on the one who demanded that the Sabbath be broken. They were like, man, we got to find that guy, the guy who said that he can walk, he can do this on the Sabbath. That's worse than breaking it. It's somebody who is saying that you can break it. But it said that Jesus, man, escaped into the crowds. He knew what was going on. He knew what was in the heart of man. Like we talked about that before. Jesus knew what's in man. And so maybe he did this specific thing, telling him to do this, so he can have this encounter with them later on, as we're going to read the encounter that Jesus has with the leading Pharisees. But it says that later on that Jesus met up with this guy in the temple, man. And he told him, he said, you see that you're whole now. You see that you're well, that you're able to walk, you're able to jump, leap, carry your mat, man. You're able to do all these things. He says, now go and sin no more, lest something worse happens to you. So that's tough right there. We're entering into sin. Jesus is commanding repentance, and he is demanding sinlessness. Now, there's some implications that can go on here, because it says, go and sin no more, lest something worse happens. And a lot of people take this as a fact that because he sinned in some form or fashion 38 years ago, that it caused this illness to come about. That could be a natural correlation. I've read a couple of things that said, though, that the understanding of the context displays something different. So first off, I'm going to say, obviously, something worse that can happen is separation eternally from God, because it is knowing who has done this that the power is manifested, that true belief comes. It's knowing who did it. And when you don't know who did it, there's a problem, because knowing is obviously a big theme that goes on in this book. And so condemnation comes. And when you don't know God, you don't fear God. And when you don't fear God, you act in any way that you desire. You continue to sin, and sin brings judgment. We've saw that before. We've already read through that. So that's the first thing, the implication that I want you guys to see from this. But the next is that sin in itself is a power over the world. That sin is just a cosmic power. And because of sin, death and sickness entered into the world. So in some sense, all sickness, all death is because of sin. It's the direct implication of sin, the direct effect of sin. So that's the second thing. But then finally, this doesn't necessarily say that it wasn't a sin that caused this to happen. So sin does cause sickness. We've seen that illustrated in Paul, as he writes for the Corinthians. He says, because you take this supper amiss, or you take this without the right mood and motivation and heart, it says some of you are sick and even fall asleep because of this. So sin is connected to sickness, just not always. So those are some of the things I wanted to answer about this specific question on go and sin no more. But what is this passage particularly saying about God? Well, he demands repentance. That God demands repentance from his people. That he doesn't allow sin to continue. This is something that's necessary. And it's something that we don't talk about a whole lot, because it's very difficult to address someone's sin. We always think about judging and all these things. But it is Jesus who says these things. That's why I say come to Jesus, because he's the one that's going to allow you to get to know him and love him. But he still doesn't allow sin. What's this say about man? I think it says about man that there is a difference between acknowledging the power of God and then knowing the God of power. There's a difference between acknowledging the healing that comes from God and knowing the God who heals. Okay, there are many people who have been healed and have seen God's power working in magnificent ways that do not even, and they even recognize it comes from God, but they don't live or have a relationship with the triune God. And then finally, I think there's a difference between doing the right thing and knowing the God of all right things, knowing the God of righteousness. There's a difference between following the rules and knowing the God who is the one who is given the law. I think that's important for us to recognize too, is there is a difference between those two things for all men. And then finally, that man must turn from sin, whether he's a Christian, a non-Christian, generally all men, is necessary for them to turn from sin, lest judgment comes upon them. So how do we apply these truths to our lives? Well, I think it's searching our hearts to see what is our motivation. Do we truly know God, or are we just seeking for his power? Are we just seeking him like a genie saying, poof, this is what I need, Jesus? Or do we truly love and know God? Has he entrusted himself to us? In the same way, why are we walking the path that we're walking? Are we living because we desire to glorify the God who has saved us? Or are we doing it because we think that by following these rules, we are going to gain some kind of status with God? We got to search our hearts. Man, it's a tough one today, guys. But self-examination always leads to a deeper fellowship with God. Hey, I appreciate you guys for listening, and I hope that you're trusting in Jesus more each day as we are going through these scriptures and study. I'll see you again in the next episode of Journey.